for joining us, the Wealthy Retailer Podcast with your host, Dan Holman. Every episode, Dan dives into the retail headlines that matter to you, the independent retailer, covering topics ranging from retailer inventory, technology, marketing, retailers' questions, and more. The Wealthy Retailer Podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. Learn more at retailbycrs.com. And now, here's Dan Holman.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Welcome again to the Wealthy Retailer Podcast. Got my main man, Rob Lawlisher from Road 55.
Hey, Dan.
Here we are, I don't know, almost the end of May. I'm in a great spot, actually, Rob.
How's that?
Because it's long weekends back to back for me. I celebrate the Canadian long weekend, and then I go celebrate the American long weekend with my American family. So I'm taking
Memorial Day action.
Weekends.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm never sure which country Dan's from or whatever his religions, but the guy takes every holiday and known to man.
If it comes up in my iPhone calendar, I'm celebrating it as a holiday.
Well, we were just saying it's, a little bit of normalcy coming back, good weather, people getting out and it's things are going to be good. I still, that story you shared last week that 5 signs that retail is going to be okay. That sticks with me. For anyone, if you missed that one, be sure to grab that podcast. That was, like I say, talking about the good stuff coming ahead, eh?
For sure. Yeah.
Speaking of ahead, let's talk about the stories this week. We got some gooders as always. Well, maybe not so good coming out of the gate, but the reality of it, and I'm sure you're going to beat down the media's take on it, but a story about supply shortages and some thoughts on what retailers can do to address. I really love this story. It's one about a clothing store that gets people traveling hundreds of miles to get to their physical store because it's one of their favorites, and that was pretty cool to see. And then a story about Retail 21 with the headline "Stronger Than You Think," and good stuff there. And as always, a retailer question like this, it's coming at you, Dan, talking about a best way a smaller retailer can help calculate their open-to-buy plan. And I'm sure you'll have some great advice on that. Okay, sir, we'll kick it off. I'll say this is the shittiest story that we're going to talk about this week, but it's a bit of reality coupled with, I guess, how you choose to look at it. It's coming from bnnbloomberg.ca. And, the headline, all of a sudden, the world economy is suddenly running low on everything. What were your thoughts here, Dan?
Yeah, man, we running low on gasoline here. Listen, I'm a big Amanda Lang fan, and do listen to BNN Bloomberg a fair amount.
Yeah.
But this story for me is just bullshit fear mongering at its best. The world is not facing a global shortage of anything. There will definitely be some delays. So I said, Rob, I'm not going to fully give in to media sources and allow ourselves an excuse, not a reason, but an excuse not to do business. Will there be a potential shortage? Will there be delays? Will there be enough goods for me to operate my store? The simple answer is yes. Regardless of what media is telling you, yes, there is plenty of inventory to go around. And we've talked about shortage. I mean, we talked about inventory shortages last month, and we're certainly seeing, last week we talked about it. We're certainly seeing some delays and shortages across, many retail verticals, especially in furniture, mattress, home accessories, and of course, apparel. There is a course correction happening as the world becomes or gets, back up to speed, I'm going to say. Okay. And the U.S. and Canadian retail economies are and will recover very quickly. The evidence of this recovery is floating off the coast of California, man. There are dozens of sea containers or vessels that are floating out there waiting to be unloaded. And yes, a bunch of it is coming from Asia, and we're going to see some challenge in that as Asian product comes. But the fact that we've got this mass amount of floating container ships out there waiting to offload in Oakland or LA or Long Point means that there's a ton of goods and they are flooding in. And where government figures last week showed, I think we hit an all-time price high, or the incline in pricing since like April 2017. It means that not only is there an increasing demand, as demand increases, prices go up, right?
Yep.
This also means that as we start to feed more and more to supply to that demand, we're also going to see increased pricing. Increased demand, delivers increased pricing. And it's about goddamn time we started inching prices up, not down. We got to get out of this race to the bottom. And perhaps a bit of a supply chain disruption is what we need. And again, I'm not going to let this be my excuse not to do business. I'm going to figure my shit out. That's what I do. I'm an entrepreneur. I figure stuff out. Yeah. I'm going to go find new products to sell. I'm going to expand my market. I'm going to go to market and look for new opportunities, which we're going to touch on a little bit later. So while this story really came off like, woo, hair on fire, we're running out of goods, this commodity pricing is changing, and tin and oil and blah, 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 whatever. It's just a byproduct of the last 18 months of bullshit, and we figure stuff out here. So I'm not going to be led astray by this. The one gleaning highlight for me from this was that there's more demand. There's some pent up demand, and it's going to create our supply chain to be better and stronger, but it's also going to create inflation, price inflation. And it's about bloody time we started increasing our prices.
Is that something like for the retailers out there, has that become I'm going to say maybe daily is way too much, but a weekly activity of just evaluating their pricing and just making sure they're not leaving anything on the table?
Yeah, every time something shows up at your back door, you're reevaluating pricing. And Rob, we've talked about this in the past. And actually, one of the questions that came a couple of weeks ago was on pricing and the psychology of pricing and what should I be doing. And we're going to throw it on one of these upcoming podcasts and talk about pricing as we start to see markets get closer and closer to us. As we approach mid to late June, we're going to readdress that whole pricing thing. But your question is on point. How often should I be reevaluating or reassessing my prices to make sure I'm not missing the mark? It's every single time you receive something, you reevaluate that retail price. What will she pay for it? Not how does it calculate, what's my 2.4 markup, but what will my client, what will my customer pay for this? And am I priced appropriately? Doesn't matter where cost lands on things. It's where price lands.
Right. Because to your point, like you may have bought some inventory months ago that you're pricing it based on that versus the whole market's changed the dynamic, even for like the mentality of the buyer that like, look, it's never going to be that price again. I joke, I'm going to open a jewelry store, but everything's going to be made of lumber. Like the way pricing's going there might outpace diamonds.
But it's going to crash, Rob. And here's the thing, that bubble will burst.
So you're saying I should return my lumber order?
I'm saying, let's not bury all our cash in Bitcoin and lumber, because the fastest way to the bottom is going to be, cryptocurrencies and overinflated commodity items like lumber.
It'll come in check. Yeah. But great takeaway though. I like what you said just about like that constant evaluation of your pricing within the store, and not necessarily what you paid. It's what they're willing to pay.
And to not be misguided by media, even those as great. Like I said, I love Amanda Lang, love BNN Bloomberg, but let's not be misguided here. We're an independent retail and we are entrepreneurial spirits here. We figure shit out. Let's go find something that we can turn back into, for $1 that we can sell for $3. Let's figure it out.
Well, and to one of your first points about like, hey, if you're looking for excuses, you'll never be disappointed. There will always be a headline or two that you can grab onto, and this is my reason, right? And I think I shared that quote a few weeks ago. You can't change the direction of the wind, but you can change the how your sails are set up every single time. I screwed that one up, but anyways, we'll move on.
Yeah, you totally. That's all right.
I'm going to print a book. Rob screwed up quotes of inspiration.
Rob's non-inspirational quotes.
Rob's semi-inspirational quotes that were screwed up from the original. Yeah, first edition. Okay, our next story comes from fox17online.com. Great little story, just talking about this boutique store that I love. They come from far and wide, travel hundreds of miles to get there. And okay, here's another quote I don't want to screw up too. I heard it yesterday. I loved it. That vanilla is the most popular flavor, but no one will drive across town for it, right? And if that doesn't stick with you, I love that quote.
Right.
And I think I got that one right. But it speaks to what's going on at this store. What stood out to you, Dan?
Well, this, Rob, this story is a great example of a few good things happening all at once. Fox 17 in West Michigan produces this regular segment called We're Open. And the segment showcases a retailer called Fig's Boutique and goes on to tell the story of how this clothing and accessory store in Montague, Michigan, man, of all places, Montague, Michigan, is getting all the feels from its customers near and far, and people driving, and not just driving, people, that vacation in Western Michigan, people that have that opportunity to travel through like Old Town USA in Western Michigan. Gorgeous little town, Montague. Been there actually.
Nice.
Growing up on the other side of the river, not far from Sarnia. We spent lots of time in Michigan. So been to Montague. And that's, one of the things I really loved about this story was how the owner, Shauna is her name, told the story about customers coming from near and far, and the trepidation she felt when she was opening her retail store in this tiny little, some would say, tourist town.
Yep.
And going through the last 14 months of pandemic and how Michigan really locked down, it meant that customers couldn't always come into the store to see her. And while she couldn't have customers, she had to get creative. She had to figure her shit out, right? And how am I going to sell merchandise? And lucky for her, not lucky, I mean, I think it worked for a lot of people, but fortunately, when she got on social media and loaded up a new website, it worked. But that wasn't what made it work and isn't what makes it work for her. And Shauna goes on to talk about in this article about fresh inventory,
yes,
which really is what jumped out at me in this story. Keeping fresh inventory has been a bigger challenge for her. She is quoted as saying, "I wouldn't want to go into a store and continue to see the same merchandise every year." That could be applied to every week, every season, depending on the type of retailer you are. I want to see fresh. I want to see new. And this is a message, Rob, that every single retailer needs to hear. Shauna and Fig's Boutique is an example of a store that a great percentage of consumers want to visit. We've talked about this, or we did talk about this perhaps last week. The consumer today is paying more. They're not motivated by discount to buy your old and ugly product. They want new and exciting. They don't want brown bananas anymore. And understanding that discounting is not the answer today, freshness is the answer. You want to move goods, bring new goods in. Buy less, way more often. We've got to shift away from front-loading our stores really heavily because they've seen it. They've been there, done that. They want to see what's new and what's exciting. And Shauna has done a great job of demonstrating, here's some fresh goods that customers that are over in Chicago are buying from her because they fell in love with her store and the uniqueness of her store and the unique products. And listen, she is a women's clothing and accessory boutique. I think she's in this article. We're going to post a link to it. There's actually 2 videos. Both of the segments that were done pre and post commercial, pre and after commercial on Fox 17, showcase Shauna telling her story. And it's a good story. And it's one that every retailer should be paying attention to. Fresh inventory is how I'm surviving.
Yep. Well, and on another topic, when you talk about like getting traffic to your retail, your physical store, your digital store, when you talk about that freshness, and you think if you don't do anything, if you create this come once and you've seen it all, you never have to return again. Don't be surprised that they never return again, right?
Right.
But like getting into the metrics of it and feeling that, geez, if my average customer comes once a month, say, and doing these things, and all of a sudden it becomes 2 times, 3 times, because you've created that, you'll want to come see it. And I can only imagine the positive effect, both digitally and brick and mortar, that's going to have for you.
And you've got to be showcasing what's new, not what's on sale. You've got to showcase that new. And Rob, there's some good examples out there.
Yep.
Look at every art gallery, look at every museum, right? How often are you going back to the same museum, back to the same art gallery that's not showcasing a new artist, a new artifact, something new, right? You have your pieces or your displays that you fall in love with that you might go back annually, right? But I don't want to see you annually. I want to see you weekly. So I've got to be showcasing my new artisans, my new finds, my new pieces every single week.
This podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. We've been empowering retailers across North America for 30 years with the latest in point-of-sale technology, best-in-class support, merchandise intelligence with open-to-buy planning, and much more. CRS has the retail solution to help take your retail business to the next level of success. Visit retailbycrs.com to learn more. Remember, Canadian Retail Solutions exists to help make you, the independent retailer, better.
Right on. Okay, Dan, this next story, Canadian retail in 2021, stronger than you think. This comes from the Real Estate News Exchange, so definitely with a real estate view to it.
Yeah.
What jumped out at you in this story?
No better source for good information than realtors. Jane Domenico and Madeline Nichols are 2 in the know retail real estate gurus. These ladies have it down. They know what they're talking about. They're both with Colliers, and they wrote this great piece that really spoke a lot about retail, but came from, certainly a real estate perspective. Okay. So I grabbed a couple of the subheadlines out of this that I really enjoyed. 1, necessity retail not impacted by the pandemic, and grocery, pharmacy, and other staples were not negatively impacted over the past year. If anything, they've become more solidified as the cornerstones in these communities that they're in. And we're going to see growth in those categories. I don't think you can go to a community today and not see a new grocery store, a new pharmacy, a new development opening up. And they become the anchor tenants that allow the rest of us, to coexist in that space. And I think you're going to see more and more of that. One of the other headlines I like, shopping from home holds increasing allure. And more people than ever across all demographics are shopping online. Not because they want to necessarily, but because they have to. And the question that we've got to be asking ourselves is, will they continue to do so post-COVID? And there are many reasons that these ladies believe that bricks and mortar shopping experience will be, ultra relevant post-COVID. Retailers and landlords have to make sure that there are opportunities to make e-commerce part of the shopping experience today and in the future. Storefronts with access to designated parking and pull-through will benefit with that curbside pickup strategy. As well, retail assets can be designed to allow for easy click and collect flow, which will allow for a positive consumer experience. And this continued, Rob, online shopping strategy that we're seeing today.
Right.
It's not really going away. There was one other one that I kind of enjoyed out of this. I'll pull one more, maybe 2. Exponential efficiencies change retail store footprints. There are two major concepts that'll change the type of retail real estate sought and secured. The first is the last mile. The last mile of e-commerce is the most expensive piece of the delivery process, and micro-fulfillment is emerging in some markets to solve this problem. In fact, in urban markets, we now talk about the last 10 feet of delivery, how to get it upstairs and through the front door in multi-residential buildings. Micro-fulfillment begins when a customer orders more than one item, multiple items from a store, from a single retailer, and everything gets sent to this micro-fulfillment center that collects them, and once everything has arrived, they deliver them all at once to the purchaser. So, we're seeing some different types of retail footprint being looked for by some of the bigger retailers that are going to change the game yet again. The last sub-headline that I pulled out came from Jonathan Weinberg, who's the VP of retail for First Gulf. And it says, retail is by no means dead. It's just evolving, as it has always done. And COVID has brought this challenge or change on us faster than we perhaps were prepared for. But as these retail partners, Colliers and First Gulf, and there's a bunch of them. Colliers, I got a soft spot for, my favorite. They're facing this challenge or change head on and recognize that we've got to be a little bit different in how we're working with our retailers, both corporate and independent, to weather the storm that has been in front of us. And Weinberg goes on to say, hey, us and all of our retailers are up for the challenge that the next 12 to 18 months is going to bring us. So,
When, as you said, it's probably 4 or 5 years of change just got compacted into a year. And what's cool about this is they're just not sitting back waiting for the old return of just fill these spaces as you've done before. They're really addressing how the behavior changes on so many fronts, and how it affects the physicality of the stores, the experiential side, and all that.
And listening to the retailers and really helping those adapt. I talked about Colliers being my favorite, working through a deal with the Colliers team now on bringing a retailer, into a non-traditional space. We're not looking at Main Street. We're not looking at traffic, at location. We're looking at how do we build the best retail facility that satisfies both the physical and digital requirement in our business. And the realtors, the brokers are all ears. They want to know, what do we need? How do our developers need to change? How do our landlords need to adapt? I mean, these guys they've gotten a bad name for a long time, realtors, both residential perhaps and commercial realtors. But they're doing the right things now, listening to the retailer, not listening to the landlord. They're saying, wait a minute, this is your customer. I need to listen to the customer the same way we do in retail. We listen to our customer, not our vendor.
Awesome. Well, speaking of listening to retailers, that's what Dan does best, and every week gets a bunch of questions thrown his way. This week, Dan, you've got a good one. I like it. It sounds like this is a retailer in growth mode, and a little bit of advice to help them get to the next stage. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so this question came from a retailer in Abbotsford, British Columbia, and writes, "Good morning, Dan. I listen to your podcast every Friday." I love that. I got really, I get a little chill on that. Say that. I listen to your podcast every Friday. On this week's show, you talked about the need to go to market because there would potentially be a shortage of goods. I'm giggling, obviously, because our first story talked about a shortage of goods.
We're the ones perpetuating these headlines.
So sorry. So you said there was a need to go to market because there potentially be a shortage of goods. He also spoke about using part of my open to buy on test merchandise. I'm not sure how to calculate my open to buy. I'm a small retailer and can't afford the Management One inventory service you provide. Is there an easy way for me to calculate my own open to buy? And so, I had a good conversation. I'm going to call them Abbotsford, and I did say, hey, Abbotsford, it's okay. Management One isn't for every retailer, although every one of our retailers might disagree. It is an added expense under cost of goods sold. So a retailer's volume definitely plays a part in, I'm going to use my air quotes, Rob, affordability. Perhaps not as big a part as willingness to change, but it plays a part nonetheless. So let's just talk about open to buy. What is open to buy? Every retailer has probably heard it. And I can tell you from personal experience, retailers are not apt or open to ask this question. Well, what do you mean open to buy? What is open to buy? How do I calculate open to buy? Blah, 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 blah. We're a little bit gun shy in asking questions about stuff that we don't always know. So open to buy is really a purchasing budget for future inventory that you're going to create, orders that you're going to create for a specific period of time, like a season. And an open to buy plan helps a retailer stock that right amount of the right product at the right time. And it allows us to then showcase the difference between how much inventory is needed and how much is available. And when I say available, it really looks at including your physical on hand, anything that's on the way, as well as outstanding or future orders. And so let's just do the math together for a second. How do we calculate open to buy? It can be done in as simple as, a scratch pad and a pencil. You can do it on a piece of foolscap. You start with your planned sales. How much are you going to sell in any period? You decide on the period. It might be 30 days, 90 days, 120 days. I like to look at 90 to 120 days forward. So I start with how much am I going to sell in that next 90 to 120 day period. I'm also going to add in how much I'm going to mark down within that period. A good rule of thumb today, depending on how quickly you're bringing inventory in, you're probably going to look at about 10% ish in markdowns, a 10% markdown rate. So I'm going to add my planned sales, how much I'm going to do. I'm going to add my markdowns, and I'm going to add how much I want to end the season with in inventory. And then I'm going to take away what I'm starting with, my fresh inventory. I'll do some math with you in a second. Okay. So planned sales plus my planned markdowns plus my ending inventory, season ending, minus my beginning inventory equals open to buy at retail. So let's just do this with numbers. So if I'm going to do $30,000 in sales in that period, whatever that period is, I'm going to maintain about a 10% markdown rate. So a 10% markdown means that I'm going to take my markdown dollars and add them back into my sales to come up with that percentage. So I'm going to say planned sales, 30,000. My planned markdowns, give or take 10% would be 3,300. I'm going to end my season, my selling period, with 100 grand at retail and inventory. And I'm going to start the month or the season with 90 grand. So 30 plus 3,300 plus 100,000 where I'm going to end, take away what I start with of 90, leaves me 43,000 and change, 43.3 at retail and open to buy. And so calculating that open to buy is simple. It's easy. You don't need a service. You need a piece of paper and a pencil to calculate it. Where our intelligence sneaks into this is a better understanding of how to forecast revenue at the category level, and then how to forecast how much stock is actually required to drive some business. And the more accurately we forecast, the less we spend, the less excess we spend. We might in fact spend a bunch more, but we're going to generate that revenue. So, we're going through this conversation, and we're talking with Abbotsford, and the question was, well, how much should I be saving for in-season or in-month fill-ins after I've placed my initial orders? And I'm saying good rule of thumb, 10 to 15%. In this case, of that $43,000 in open to buy, I'm going to save $6,000 at retail to spend in month, in season, on replenishment, on a refill, on something that was a home run. I'm going to save a bit of dollars. And then it came the question, well, how much should I save in test merchandise? Or how much, should I spend in my open to buy on this test merchandise, which really was the original question. And I'm saying spend 20 to 25% of your open to buy dollars. In this case, that, is 20 to 25% of the 43,000 that we did the math on, means that we're going to spend about 10K at retail on brand new stuff. Test a vendor I have never carried or haven't carried in the last couple of seasons, an expanded category, something I've not done before. I'm going to test the market. Yep. I'm going to test a new vendor. I'm going to test a new style, a new color, I'm going to test something. So when all this is said and done, on that $30,000 and $30,000 in revenue and $90,000 in fresh inventory that has landed in the last 90 days is deemed fresh. I'm going to be left with about 26K at retail that I'm going to spend on my open to buy. Out of that total 43, I'm really only going to spend about 25 to 27 on what I call rollover merchandise.
Yeah. Same
vendors, same . So let's just talk for a second about fresh inventory. Let's go back to Shauna at Fig's Boutique. You have to know what your fresh inventory is. And part of the open to buy calculation is knowing your inventory value at retail. Too many of us make the same mistake. We calculate our inventory at cost. Cost doesn't matter to anyone but you. To the retailer, it's about the retail value. And I encourage every retailer to start looking at their open to buy in retail dollars. That's what the customer spends. And it's your job to get as much as you can at retail for your cost dollar, right? So if I need $1,000 worth of retail goods and I can buy it for $250, good on you. It's still about what the customer is spending. And we've got to measure every single vote at what she's spending. And she spends retail dollars. So when you look at doing this open to buy math, you're going to start with that beginning of season or beginning of month inventory, and you're only going to use the portion that represents itself as fresh. And that means that it's landed in your store in the last 90 days. Otherwise, it's old and ugly, and it's on a get out of Dodge plan and shouldn't be impacting your open to buy. And one of the mistakes that retailers often make is that they calculate their open to buy from their total inventory in a category, not their fresh inventory, which means they're holding themselves back from buying fresh goods. And as we've talked about over and over again, fresh goods is what drives revenue. And it's not about us today being ultra lean in inventory. It's actually about us being a little bit thick in inventory. It's about us buying a little bit more, being a little bit more aggressive while we're seeing this, message of shortage out there. Buy deeper, buy thicker, not wider. Deeper. Buy more in a category that is performing in your store. And so for this retailer in Abbotsford that felt they couldn't afford a Management One service, I totally get it. And as I said, it's not necessarily for every retailer. It is part of your cost of goods sold. So you've got to have revenue to be able to pay for that. And we don't want to see a retailer get into a place where they're paying something out and not getting a return on that investment, right? It's got to pay you back a better ROI than every vendor and product in your store. Otherwise, why do it? So for those retailers that are in that, I'm going to say infancy stage, but I mean in a lower volume setting, I've got a great little OTB cheat sheet that I'm happy to share. Awesome. It's a simple little Google spreadsheet. Send an email to dan@thewealthyretailer.com. I'll give you access to this this simple little OTB cheat sheet. We'll chat about it for 5 or so minutes just to get you on the right path. And here you go. This is how you're going to calculate it. I can't replace the good science, the good intelligence that Management One provides. There is no body on the planet that can replace that level of intelligence. So we've got to go back to a top down or a bottom up plan. And a top down plan starts with, how much am I going to sell? And everybody can, throw a dart at the board and figure that out.
Yeah, how you describe that, and for those on the, we'll say, still on the paper and pen plan.
Yeah.
I understand it, but at the same time, you kind of, unless they're really good at math and in multiple categories, when you talk about that category part, I like that, because otherwise you're forced to treat all things as being equal in your store, right? And that alone, I know mistakes are going to be made when it comes to your buying plan, because again, unless you're really good at math and you're breaking that into multiple categories, you can quickly see the value that it's going to bring to. But again, hey, if you're at that stage, and it's cool that you're offering the cheat sheet, because you're only doing that because hey, I want to get you to the next level. I want to help you grow a little bit.
I want you to be able to escalate your game. I want to see you elevate, and it doesn't necessarily have to come by me selling you an open to buy service, or as strongly as I believe in Management One, it still isn't right for every retailer. And I'm going to get questions, well, how big does a retailer need to be? And I think we've talked about this lots of times. We've started with retailers as small as a couple $100,000, and if you're in that world, we'll figure out a way to make a plan work for you. And I promise that you're going to be better with the plan than you are without it. And, there's 80 people running, 80 retail experts right now in I think it's 80-ish in North America providing the Management One service. It's not about who you work with, although that plays a part in it. It's that you have this concrete plan that's taking you to a new destination. So, get on there and let's check it out. And we'll put a link to it in our newsletter this week, so that you can absolutely go and check these guys out. And I'm happy to share all the information I have on it. Would love to have a conversation with a retailer looking for it. And again, if you'd like to try, if you've not done this open to buy before and you just want to see a cheat sheet and hear how someone else objectively looks at it, shoot an email to dan@thewealthyretailer.com. And we'll have a quick conversation. The same thing goes, Rob, for anybody that has a question that we want to get answered. And here's a good example of a retailer that said, hey, I listen to your podcast every Friday morning. Love the shit out of that.
Thank you for that.
But I want to be anonymous. It's okay if you use the question, just don't, say where it came from. And that could be just a place of, someone being embarrassed by what they don't know. So don't be afraid. Don't be gun shy about things you don't know. Just fire the question off and let's get an answer for you. No judgment. Just do it.
Excellent. Right on. Thanks for sharing that, Dan. That was great. And as Dan said, if you haven't yet, please head to retailbycrs.com. Sign up for the newsletter. We're going to have the links to these stories. Well, link to that Management One bit too, give you a bit more understanding there. We'll also have a few more stories that we didn't have time to chat about today, but definitely worth checking out. Love the shoppers are craving treasure hunting for clothes again, and a little story about that. And I'm raising my hand. Some of us have been on a pub crawl many times in our life, but have you been on a boutique crawl? That jumped out at me. Fun little story about some retailers coming together to create this great experience. And safe, smart, and seamless 3 ways technology can boost in-store retail. I'm sure there'll be something of interest for everyone there. Great job this week, Dan.
Thank you. You too. All right, everyone. Like Rob said, head over to the Wealthy Retailer. Head over to retailbycrs.com. Join that newsletter.
Perfect.
Catch us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Leave us a review, a comment, a question. We love you for it. Thank you. Hope you have the best retail week yet.